Hey everybody, James Shepard here with another edition of the Merchant Sales Insight. I want to talk to you today about the race to the top with big merchant accounts. Now, we've all heard of the race to the bottom, where there's all this pricing pressure. But I had this really interesting story that my lead developer and business partner Jack Christensen told me recently that really was typical of a trend that I just haven't talked about very much, and I want to discuss it. So, one of his developer friends, he's a full-time developer, and this senior developer works for one company, okay, has one client. And this one client is a very large nationwide company that provides plumbing services. And they facilitate this through, an app and some other, software that they've built. And this software is custom built for them, right? This is like their developer built this custom thing, this custom software experience in this app that they use for people to be able to find the plumber they want, pay the plumber, all of that. And a big part of that is the payment processing integration, right? So they want people to be able to store a card on file, pay their bill when the plumber comes out, that sort of thing. So this senior developer was working with an ISO who will remain nameless. It was a processing company that everybody would know, believe me, and working with them with one of their APIs. And this developer got so frustrated trying to integrate with this legacy API and just the limitations with that, he actually convinced this company to switch from this humongous processing company to go to Stripe, and didn't even negotiate the price at all. They moved over to Stripe, probably cost them at least 50 to 100 basis points more just because of the nature of the type of business they're dealing with. So this is a company that does millions of dollars a month, millions in processing volume. Why on earth would they switch to Stripe, right? It's like the race to the top. Why would they pay so much more to work with Stripe? Well, to understand that question, you have to understand this kind of race to the top. So the race to the bottom is, what's the least amount we can pay for payment processing? But what you're going to find is for a lot of these companies where software is a big part of their competitive advantage, and they have a room of developers that they pay that are W-2 employees, what's really important to them is this smooth customer experience. In the Merchant Sales Insight, I actually gave an example. Imagine you had a company where you own parking garages all over the country, right? So nationwide, you have parking garages in every city. And a big part of your value proposition is you had this special app that people could download where when they pull into the parking garage, they can scan this QR code on their phone or something like that. They can check in using this mobile app, and it just opens the gate. They automatically pay and they pull into the parking garage, right? Well, how much is that worth, right? Versus if you didn't have an API that would allow you to easily integrate payments into this app, you would need a human at each of your parking garages to take the payment, or you would need a antiquated like machine with like a paper system. You know what I mean? How much would it be worth to have that smooth customer experience to get people to always go to your parking garage because they had that mobile app? They loved it. It integrated with their payment, selection of choice, stored their payment method. It was convenient and easy. That becomes the constraint. And so the question almost becomes, how much are these companies willing to pay to process payments in a way that is really, really slick and convenient within their custom software solution? So what I want to talk to you about today is what you need to know, kind of the terms you need to understand if you want to be able to go after these businesses. Now, this edition is sponsored by NMI, so NMI.com, who is without a doubt the leader in this area of having a smooth API. I have no doubt that this developer I'm talking about who had so much issue with the API integration, if the ISO that sold this humongous account, if they would have pointed this developer towards NMI and done the NMI integration instead of a direct integration, this developer would have been fine. He would have had no issue and they would not have lost this account. Instead, they just gifted Stripe thousands of dollars a month in profit on this huge account. So NMI is fantastic. NMI.com. I'll talk more about that at the end. Okay. So what do you need to understand in order to go after some of these nationwide accounts where they have their own software, even just a large local company, but they have their own software? That's the key difference. I've talked in other editions recently about selling large accounts where it is more about the pricing pressure and that negotiation. But in this case, we're talking about companies where the software integration is the main thing. First of all, we have to talk about understanding the difference between custom software, customized software, and then API integration. Okay. Custom software, it means that the developers are building software specifically for one business type. Okay. One business, not business type, business. Like, so we have this single business, like I mentioned before. Here's our company. We own, parking garages all over the country, and we want people to have an app that they can download. That would be custom software that was built specifically for that one company. That's custom. You also have customized software. This is for large companies that are using things like Salesforce or Zoho or an ERP system, where you can hire developers to customize that software further, but where it operates on top of this really secure framework. And we see that more and more today. And so in those situations, they can also choose their payment processor that they want to use, but they have to integrate it into this kind of framework. But that's customized software. And then thirdly, we have the API integration. Okay. So when you say, well, we have the software that we created custom, maybe we have some customized software as well, but now we need something like payment processing. Well, if I own the parking garage, I'm not going to pay my developers to build a gateway, right? Like, that's too specialized. Instead, I'm going to pay my developers to integrate with somebody else's software. And the way you do that integration is with an API. And I realized when I was making this content that I've actually never made any content about an API. I talk about it a lot, but what is it? Well, an API is how one software sends instructions to another software. So I thought a good way to illustrate this would be to talk about how something like NMI works. So let's continue with this example of the nationwide parking garage company. So again, we have this app so that when people pull into the parking garage, if they download this app, when they pull into the parking garage, they can just, tap their phone, or they can use the QR code or something. They can check in at the garage, and it's going to automatically charge them based on when they pull out of the garage, right? How would that work? Well, let me give you an example. So we have the software. We have a team of developers, and we say, okay, integrate with the API from NMI's API. So what would they do? Well, when somebody downloads the app, we might prompt them to say, add a payment method on file, right? You probably want to store a credit card on file. So every time you park at this garage, we can automatically bill your credit card. How would that work? Well, the developers would use the API from NMI, and they would send instructions, and they would say, create a new customer in the NMI vault. And it would be like, here's customer. And then NMI would send instructions back to say, we successfully created a new customer with that name. Here's the unique identifier XYZ123. That's whatever it is. This is the unique identifier for that customer. Next, our software that we built might say, here's the cardholder information, right? So they added their credit card. They want to store a card payment on file. So they would send that to NMI. NMI would return back and say, okay, we stored that payment method on file. Here's the unique identifier for that payment method. Okay. Then when they actually check in and then they check out, and our software says, okay, we've calculated based on how long they were in the garage that they owe us $17.50. Now they would send instructions. Their software would automatically send instructions to the NMI API that says, hey, go find customer XYZ123, pull up the payment method with this ID number, and charge it $17.50. NMI would receive that instruction. They would charge that card, and then they would send back and say if it was approved or declined. And this would all happen like in a few milliseconds, right? And it would come back. Approved, here's the approval code, right? So it's that communication. So the software, the customer that's checking into the garage and leaving the garage, they would never experience NMI. They wouldn't even know that NMI exists. They wouldn't be using their, virtual terminal or anything like that. They would only be using this custom software, but behind the scenes, the developers would be using the NMI API to communicate between their software and the NMI software and get instructions back and forth. It would be a two-way communication where we're sending information to NMI sending information back. That's an API at a high level. Once you understand that, that's how payment processing, that's what it means when we say integrated payments. What we mean is they're using an API to integrate and to send instructions about storing payment methods, charging cards, setting up subscriptions, whatever it is they need on the payment side. Okay. So in order to sell these accounts, you just need to have a basic understanding of that fact. And then you can participate in this idea of this race to the top. Go to these companies and say, how's everything going? Oh, you're using Stripe. Well, if you used our company, right, here's what we can provide to you. We can provide a great experience. Maybe we can offer you a little bit of cost savings, right? And so because it's this race to the top, there's a lot of margin. I mean, a lot of these accounts with Stripe have 150, 200 basis points of margin a lot of times, just because of the nature of the business, larger average ticket, that sort of thing. You can come in and say, we've got NMI and we have an API that's comparable to Stripe, that's really easy to use, full feature, omni-channel. It's a fantastic API, but we can get you better credit card processing rates, that sort of thing. You can also go to others who are using legacy products that are not good, and you can say, hey, if you come with us, we're going to make this API available, and you can actually charge them even a higher price, but they're willing to pay that in order to get a smooth integration with payment processing. So a couple of things I want you to pull out of this one. Understand that there are these big businesses who write their own software. So their developers can integrate with whatever they want them to integrate with on the payment side. Understand that there's not a lot of price sensitivity there. Mainly, they want to make sure they're providing a streamlined experience for the end user of their software, and they need to make sure it integrates tightly. So be careful about talking just price there. They want to make sure they have an API. The second thing to pull out of it is the concept of the API and what it is. It's very simple, really. I mean, you don't need to be a computer programmer to understand the concept of the API. It is just your software is able to send instructions to another software. In this case, a software like our sponsor, NMI.com, it allows them to use that API to communicate back and forth, to store payment information securely, to run payments, to set up subscriptions, to store customers, all of that information securely in NMI's Vault technology. So if you want to learn more about that, go to nmi.com, check it out. Fantastic solution. Ask about their APIs. If you want to read or listen to this entire Merchant Sales Insight, go to ccsalespro.com/insights. Check it out. My name is James Shepard. Thanks for watching this video.